The marketplace of Vera Prime was alive with noise and color. Two suns hung high in the red sky, shining down on stalls filled with strange fruits, glowing fabrics, and machines that hummed softly. Alien voices called out prices, haggling in a dozen languages. It was a place where eyes never rested and hands moved quickly. Sometimes too quickly. Zyra stood behind her father's stall, arranging a pile of blue crystal pears. She was young, but already knew how to spot trouble. And today, she saw it. A human boy, thin as a shadow, moving between the stalls like smoke. His clothes were worn, his boots falling apart, but his eyes were sharp. He stopped near a basket of bright yellow fruit, glanced around, and with one smooth motion, slipped one into his pocket. Zyra's eyes narrowed. Humans in the city were rare, and most of them worked under watch. This one was alone, and he was stealing. She stepped out from behind the stall and walked towards him. Her boots clicked on the metal ground, her long coat brushing against her knees. "Hey," she said, her voice low but firm. The boy froze, turning his head slowly to meet her gaze. Up close, she could see the dirt on his face, the tired lines for someone so young. He didn't look afraid. Instead, he looked ready, like he had been caught before. "That's not yours," Zyra said, pointing to his pocket. He hesitated, then pulled the fruit out and held it in his hand. "I'm not stealing," he said quietly. "I'm surviving." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one ever spoke to her like that, not even the alien boys in her district. But before she could ask what he meant, a loud voice shouted from behind, "Thief! Human thief!" Two armored guards pushed through the crowd, their rifles glowing with charge. The boy's eyes darted left and right. He turned to run straight towards her stall, and in that moment, Zyra made a choice she couldn't explain. "Here, she whispered, grabbing his arm and pulling him behind the curtain of her stall. The guards rushed past, searching the crowd. One paused near her table. "You see a human boy run this way?" the guard asked, his visor glowing red. Zyra forced her voice to sound bored. "No, only customers," she said, arranging the pears again. The guard grunted and moved on. Disappearing into the noise, she waited until the crowd swallowed them completely before turning to the boy. He was crouched low, breathing fast, clutching the fruit in his hand. "Why did you help me?" he asked, suspicion in his voice. Zyra shrugged. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe I wanted to see what you'd do next." He stared at her for a long moment, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small metal disc. It was round, smooth, and covered with strange markings. He placed it on her table. "A thank you," he said simply. Before she could reply, he slipped into the crowd and vanished. Zyra picked up the disc, turning it in her hand. The markings were human, she was sure. But there was something else, an old symbol she had only seen in banned history books. Her father's voice came from behind her. "Where did you get that?" She quickly hid it in her pocket. "Just a trade," she said. But her heart was beating faster. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about him. His bold eyes, his strange gift, and his words, "I'm surviving." The city was full of secrets. But Zyra had a feeling this boy's secret could change everything. *0 woke early the next day, but the market felt different. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow heavier. She kept glancing at the pocket where the small metal disc rested. Its weight was strange. Not heavy like a stone, but heavy like a promise. She had planned to give it to her father. But something inside her told her not to. Her father was busy unloading goods from the morning shipment. He didn't notice when she slipped the disc out and studied it under the stall's dim lamp. The markings weren't just human, they were from the old Terran colonies. Her teacher had once said those colonies were abandoned after the war. No one went there anymore, so why did a human boy from the streets have something from there? By midday, she spotted him again. He was across the market, moving fast, not towards the food stalls this time, but toward the old repair district. Zyra hesitated, then left her stall, blending into the crowd. She followed him through winding alleys where the walls smelled of rust and damp air. Finally, he stopped in front of a junk shop, looking over his shoulder before slipping inside. She pushed the door open quietly. The place was dark. The shelves piled with broken machines and tangled wires. The boy was speaking to an old alien with 4 eyes, handing over some small pieces of scrap. When he noticed her, his expression tightened. "You followed me," he said flatly. "You left something with me," Zero replied, pulling the disc from her pocket. The old alien glanced at it, and his eyes widened slightly before he turned away. "That's not for you," the boy said, stepping closer. "Then who is it for?" she asked, refusing to step back. He glanced at the shop door, like he was listening for trouble. Finally, he said, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me," she said, crossing her arms. "It's a map," he whispered. "A map to something my people lost. And your people would destroy." Before she could ask more, a loud metallic clang came from outside. Voices shouted. Boots hit the ground hard. The boy's eyes widened. "They followed me." Zira turned to see armed enforcers filling the doorway. The old shopkeeper hissed and disappeared into the back room. Leaving them alone, the boy grabbed her wrist and pulled her through a narrow gap between shelves. They crashed through the back wall into a tiny alley, the sound of footsteps chasing close behind. "This way," he said, leaping over a low fence. She followed, her heart pounding, the metal disc still clutched in her hand. They ran until her lungs burned, finally ducking into a storage tunnel beneath the old transit lines. The air smelled like oil and dust. They crouched in the dark, listening as the shouts above faded. "You're crazy," she whispered. He laughed softly. "Takes one to know one. Why are they after you?" she asked. "Because I'm looking for something that's not supposed to exist anymore," he said. "And because I've taken things from people who don't like losing." She thought about the first time she saw him, about the fruit in his hand. "You're a thief," she said. "I'm a survivor," he corrected. "And sometimes surviving means stealing from those who have too much." They stayed in the tunnel until the sounds above were gone. When they climbed out, the boy didn't head back to the market. Instead, he walked towards the far edge of the city. "You're not coming back?" Zyra asked. "Not for a while," he said. "I have to finish something." He looked at her for a long moment, then added, "Keep the disc. If I don't come back, it's yours." Before she could reply, he slipped away into the maze of streets. Zyra stood there, the fading sun casting long shadows across the ground. The city felt colder than it had that morning. She didn't know why she cared about a human boy she barely knew, but she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever he was searching for would soon pull her into danger too. The rain fell hard over the city of Vera Prime, making the metal streets shine like black glass. Zyra stood in the market, staring at the empty space where the boy used to appear. Weeks had passed since their last meeting, and part of her had convinced herself he wasn't coming back. But that night, as lightning flashed over the horizon, she saw him. He was running, not walking, his clothes drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead. Behind him, 2 enforcer drones zipped through the air, their sirens screaming without thinking. Zira dropped the basket she was carrying and pushed through the crowd. "Evan," she shouted over the storm. He spotted her, his eyes wide, and instead of running away, he ran towards her. "Move!" he yelled, and the next second, a plasma bolt burned the ground where she had been standing. They sprinted together down a narrow side street. The drones close behind, Evan reached into his coat and pulled out something wrapped in cloth. It was heavy, glowing faintly through the fabric. "What did you steal this time?" she asked, breathless. Not stealing retrieving, he said through gritted teeth. And if they catch me, it's over. The drones fired again, sparks raining down as the plasma hit the walls. They turned a corner only to find more enforcers. Blocking the path, Evan cursed under his breath. Then grabbed her hand and pulled her through a half-collapsed doorway. Inside, the building smelled of old smoke and damp stone. They ran up a broken staircase, their footsteps echoing in the hollow space. On the third floor, Evan stopped, pressing his back against the wall. They're closing in. Zero whispered. He shook his head, his eyes fixed on the glowing object. In his hands, "I can't lose this," he said. "It's the last piece I need." Before she could ask what it was, the wall beside them exploded. And one of the drones hovered through the hole, its targeting light sweeping over them. Evan pushed her behind a beam and pulled a small black device from his belt. A high-pitched tone filled the air, making the drones shake violently before crashing to the ground in a shower of sparks. "You just destroyed an enforcer unit," Zira said, her voice half amazed, half horrified. "Yeah," he replied. "And now they'll really be after us." They slipped out through the roof, climbing across slick metal panels as the rain poured harder. From up here, the city stretched endlessly, lights and towers, broken bridges, shadows of giant airships moving through the fog. Zira glanced at the object he carried, the glow pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. "What is it?" she asked again. "It's a locator," he said, "for something hidden far outside the city, something my people buried before your people came." They reached a rusted fire escape and climbed down, landing in a deserted loading yard. Evan pulled her under the shelter of an old cargo hauler, both of them breathing hard. "I shouldn't have come back here," he admitted, "but I needed this, and I needed to see you." The last part caught her off guard. "Why?" she asked, her voice low. "Because," he said, "when I'm done with this, nothing will be the same. And I don't know who I can trust anymore." The sound of boots echoed in the yard. Zira peeked out and saw armed patrols sweeping the area, their searchlights cutting through the rain. They had minutes, maybe less, before they were found. Evan tightened the cloth around the glowing object. His jaw set. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "If I leave alone, I might not make it." Her heart raced. If she left, she'd be betraying her father, her home, her people. But if she stayed, she'd never know the truth about the human boy who kept appearing in her life like a storm she couldn't stop. The patrols were getting closer, their lights nearly on them. Zira met his eyes. "All right," she said. "But if you get me killed, I'll haunt you." Evan smiled faintly, then grabbed her hand. And together they slipped into the darkness at the edge of the city, leaving everything familiar behind. The city lights faded behind them until they were only faint glimmers in the rain. Ahead, the open lands stretched into shadow, broken only by the jagged shapes of old ruins and skeletal towers left from the war. The air here was colder, sharper, carrying the smell of wet metal and something faintly sweet. Zira had never been outside the city walls before, and every step felt like it might be a mistake. They walked quickly through the mud, their boots sinking into the ground. Evan kept glancing over his shoulder, his grip tight on the wrapped object. "How far are we going?" she asked, her voice low. "As far as it takes," he replied, not slowing. The wind howled through the empty frames of fallen buildings, sounding almost like voices by the time they reached the edge of the ruins. The rain had stopped, but the clouds were still heavy. They ducked into the shell of an old transport station, its walls cracked and covered in alien moss that glowed faintly blue. Evan set the glowing object on the ground and unwrapped it. It wasn't just a locator, it was like a living compass, the surface shifting as if made of liquid metal. Symbols appeared and disappeared, and every time one glowed brighter, the needle inside adjusted itself. Zira crouched beside him, fascinated. "What's it pointing to?" she asked. Something buried deep out here, he said. Something my people left behind when they fled. He glanced at her, then added quietly, "It's not just treasure, Zyra. It's a piece of history no one once found before." She could ask more. A sound echoed through the ruins, soft at first, then growing clearer. It was footsteps, but not human. Evan's expression hardened. "They found us faster than I thought," he whispered, grabbing the locator and stuffing it back into his coat from the shadows between broken pillars. 3 figures emerged. They were tall, armored, and their faces were hidden behind mirrored masks. Each carried a curved weapon that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Zyra's stomach tightened. She recognized the insignia on their armor. "They're not enforcers," she said. "They're hunters." The tallest one stepped forward, his voice deep and mechanical. "Human, you carry what is not yours." Evan didn't move. "It was never yours either," he replied. The hunter tilted his head slightly. "Then you will not mind if we take it." In a blink, they charged. Evan grabbed Zyra's arm and pulled her behind a collapsed column as one of the hunters. Blades cut through the air where she had been standing. Sparks flew when metal hit stone, the sound echoing through the ruins. They ran, weaving between crumbling walls. The hunters closed behind. A bolt of energy shot past them, scorching the ground. Evan swung the locator around his neck and pulled a small sphere from his belt. "Cover your ears," he shouted, tossing it behind them. A deafening pulse burst through the air, and the hunters staggered, their helmets flickering with static. "That won't hold them for long," he said, pulling her toward a dark tunnel half buried in debris. They slipped inside, the sound of pursuit fading as they went deeper. The tunnel was narrow and smelled of dust and rust. Water dripped from cracks above, the echoes making it feel like someone else was walking just behind them. Finally, they stopped to catch their breath. Zyra leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling. "You didn't tell me you had people trying to kill you," she said. "I have everyone trying to kill me," he replied, managing a tired smile. "Comforting," she muttered, though she couldn't help smiling back for a moment. As they moved deeper, the locator began to hum softly, the glow brightening with each step. Whatever it was leading them to, they were getting closer. But Zyra couldn't shake the thought that every step forward was also pulling her farther from the life she knew, and the strangest part was, she didn't feel like turning back. The tunnel seemed endless, twisting deeper under the ruins until the air grew heavy and still. The only light came from the locator, its glow shifting from silver to gold as if it sensed something ahead. Zyra's boots scraped over stone as they walked, the sound too loud in the silence. She was about to ask Evan how much farther when the ground suddenly sloped downward. They slid into a wide chamber, the ceiling high and lost in shadows. In the center stood a structure unlike anything she had seen before. It was shaped like a spire, but made of smooth black metal that seemed to drink in the light. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface, matching the ones she had seen on the locator. Evan's steps slowed, his eyes locked on it. "This is it," he whispered, his voice almost reverent. Zyra followed him closer, but a sharp sound stopped her metal striking stone. From the far side of the chamber, a group of figures stepped into the dim glow. It wasn't the hunters from before. These were soldiers in dark armor, the kind worn by the city's elite enforcers. The one in front raised a rifle, the red targeting beam landing on Evan's chest. "Step away from the artifact," the soldier ordered. Evan didn't move. "It belongs to my people," he said, his voice steady. The soldier's tone turned colder. "Your people lost the war. This belongs to the council now." Before Zyra could react, one of the soldiers moved toward her. Her instinct screamed, and she stepped back. Evan's eyes darted between her and the spire. He made his choice in an instant. Grabbing her wrist, he pulled her behind the structure as the soldiers opened fire. Energy bolts slammed into the spire, making the air crackle with heat. One shot hit the wall near Zyra's head, the flash leaving spots in her vision. Evan reached into his coat and pulled out a small, disc-shaped device. "Hold this against the spire," he told her. "What is it?" she asked. "Something that will make sure they never use it against us," he said. The soldiers were closing in, their voices echoing through the chamber. Zyra pressed the device to the spire, and the symbols across its surface flared bright blue. The locator's hum turned into a deep, vibrating pulse that shook the floor. A wave of light burst outward, knocking the soldiers back, their weapons clattering to the ground. Evan pulled the device free and stuffed it into his coat. "Move!" he shouted, and they ran toward a side passage just as the chamber began to tremble. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, the sound deafening. By the time they emerged into the cold night air, the ground behind them had split open, swallowing the spire into darkness. They didn't stop running until they reached the edge of the old ruins. Both of them were gasping, soaked in sweat. Zyra turned to him. "You destroyed it," she said, still catching her breath. "I saved it," he replied, "from them. And maybe from you." His words cut, but there was no time to argue, because, in the distance, a familiar metallic growl echoed through the night. The hunters were back, and this time, they weren't alone. The sound of the hunters carried through the ruins like the echo of metal bones grinding together. Zyra's pulse quickened, and Evan's jaw tightened as he scanned the shadows. They were tired, but stopping meant death. The moonlight caught on the hunters' armor as they emerged from the dark taller, sharper, and now joined by smaller drone units circling overhead. Zyra and Evan ducked into the skeleton of a collapsed transport hangar. The air inside smelled of old fuel and rust. Evan pressed his back against the wall, eyes darting toward the nearest exit. "They've boxed us in," he muttered. Zyra gripped the edge of a broken beam, searching for a way out. Then her eyes fell on something half buried under debris, an old fuel tank. "Its seal broken, but still smelling potent," she pointed. "If we can light that, we might block their path." Evan's lips curved into a quick smile. "That's risky, but I like it." The hunters moved closer, their steps slow, deliberate. One of them called out in a voice that felt too deep to be natural. "Human, give us the device and we will make your end quick." Evan raised his voice in reply. "Come and take it." The drones swarmed forward, their lights sweeping over every corner. Evan tossed Zyra a small flare from his belt. "Wait until they're close," he whispered. Zyra nodded, her hand tight around it. The first hunter stepped into the hangar, his blade humming with a faint energy field. Two more followed, the drones circling above them like vultures. Zyra struck the flare, its sudden red light cutting through the shadows. The hunters turned toward her just as she flung it into the broken fuel tank. The explosion ripped through the hangar with a roar. Flames shot upward, and the shockwave hurled drones into the walls. The hunters staggered, their armor scorched, their formation broken. Evan grabbed Zyra's hand, pulling her through a gap in the wall before the fire consumed the space. They sprinted through the ruins, the night wind sharp against their faces. Behind them, the flames lit the sky. But the hunters' roars carried over the crackle of burning metal. "They're not giving up," Zyra said between breaths. "They never do," Evan replied. "Not until one of us is dead." They reached a ridge that overlooked the distant wastelands. From here, the city was just a faint glow far behind them. Evan stopped, turning to face her. "You don't have to keep going," he said, his voice softer now. "If you stay with me, you're choosing my enemies as yours." Zyra looked at him, rain still glistening on his face. "You think I'd survive long if I went back?" "They'd see me as a traitor the moment they find out I helped you." For a moment, neither of them spoke, only the wind moved, carrying the faint hum of the locator still hidden under his coat. Then Evan said, if we make it through this, I owe you more than my life." Zyra met his eyes. "You owe me answers," she said. "All of them." From the darkness beyond the ridge, the hunters' glowing visors appeared, one by one. There was no more running, they were out of ground. Evan reached for his weapon, and Zyra picked up a jagged piece of metal from the ground. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. The ridge was silent for only a heartbeat before the hunters advanced. Their blades catching the moonlight, Evan stepped in front of Zyra without thinking. The locator's faint hum, now a steady vibration against his chest. The lead hunter stopped a few paces away, tilting his head. "Human. Hand over what you've stolen, and we will spare the alien girl." Zyra felt heat rise in her chest. "He doesn't have to give you anything," she said, stepping forward. The hunter's visor turned toward her. "You speak as if you are one of his kind. I'm speaking as someone who chooses who she stands with," she said, her voice steady. The hunter's blade lifted, and the other two fanned out, moving to flank them. Evan whispered without looking at her, "When I say down, hit the ground," she didn't ask. Why, just nodded. The hunters closed in. And Evan's hand slipped into his coat. The locator flared brighter than it ever had before, its symbols spinning wildly. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and a deep, metallic groan rose from somewhere far below. "Down!" Evan shouted. They dropped as a blinding column of light shot up from the ground, smashing through the ridge and engulfing the hunters. Their armor sparked and cracked, their visors shattering as they were flung backward into the dark. The light faded, leaving the smell of scorched metal in the air. Only silence followed. The hunters gone. Zyra pushed herself up, her ears still ringing. "What was that?" she asked. Evan looked down at the locator, its glow fading now to nothing. "A call," he said quietly, "to something older than both our peoples. And now it's done." They stood there for a long moment, the wind carrying the sound of the city far behind them. When Evan finally spoke again, his voice was softer, almost unsure. "You could go back now, if you want." She studied him, remembering the first day she saw him in the market. A thief with defiant eyes. "I caught you stealing once," she said slowly. "I thought that was the end of it." A faint smile touched her lips. "Turns out, I was just stealing you from the rest of the galaxy." He blinked at her, caught between surprise and something warmer. "You're serious?" he asked. She stepped closer, the moonlight brushing over her face. "I don't follow someone this far just to say goodbye." Years later, when the story spread across both human and alien worlds, they would talk about the girl who caught the boy stealing and ended up marrying him. But standing on that ridge, with the night wind in their faces and the stars stretching endlessly above, it wasn't a story yet. It was just the two of them, alive, together, and finally walking toward whatever came next.